in the heart of a crumbling empire, where the air hung heavy with the acrid scent of smoke and despair. Berlin stood as the throbbing pulse of Nazi Germany, a city once vibrant, now teetering on the edge of oblivion. As the winter of 1945 gripped the streets with icy fingers, the distant rumble of artillery echoed like a foreboding whisper, hinting at the storm gathering beyond the horizon. Shadows lengthened over grand boulevards lined with shattered facades, where the wind carried the faint cries of a population clinging to the remnants of normalcy. Street lamps flickered dimly under the blackout curtains, casting eerie glows on faces etched with exhaustion and unspoken dread. The Reich's capital, adorned with swastika banners fluttering like tattered ghosts pulsed with the deceptive rhythm trams, still clattered along warped tracks. Newspapers peddled propaganda laced with hollow victories, and cafes served watery ersatz coffee to patrons who murmured in hushed tones. Yet beneath this veneer, the ground trembled subtly, as if the earth itself sensed the impending fracture. No one dared voice the truth aloud, but in the quiet moments between air raid sirens, eyes met with a shared understanding that the world they knew was unraveling thread by thread. The roots of this fragility traced back to the euphoric days of 1933, when Adolf Hitler ascended to power amid roaring crowds and torchlit parades, transforming Berlin into the epicenter of a regime promising renewal and dominance. Grand architectural visions reshaped the skyline Albert Speer. Monumental designs envisioned a Germania of colossal domes and avenues, wide enough for triumphant marches, symbolizing an eternal Reich. The 1936 Olympics showcased the city as a beacon of Aryan supremacy, with Jesse Owens' victories casting ironic shadows over the propaganda machine. As war engulfed Europe in 1939, Berlin adapted to the cadence of conflict. Factories hummed around the clock producing tanks and munitions, while the population swelled with forced laborers from conquered lands, their weary forms blending into the urban tapestry. The Tiergarten's lush greenery gave way to vegetable plots for sustenance, and the Brandenburg Gate, once a symbol of unity, now stood sentinel over a divided continent. In those early war years, the air was thick with the metallic temps of industry, punctuated by the triumphant blare of radio broadcasts declaring blitzkrieg successes. But as Allied bombers first droned overhead in 1940, the illusion began to crack, bombs whistling down like harbingers of a reversal no one yet fully comprehended. Daily existence in Berlin during the waning months of 1944 unfolded in a rhythm dictated by scarcity and surveillance, where the clatter of ration cards being stamped echoed through dimly lit shops. Families queued for hours in the biting cold for meager portions of bread laced with sawdust and potatoes turned black from frost, their breaths forming misty clouds in the frostbitten air. Children, bundled in threadbare coats, played amid the rubble of previous raids, their laughter a fragile counterpoint to the omnipresent hum of anti-aircraft guns. Scanning the skies, women, many now heads of households with husbands at distant fronts, trudged to work in munitions plants, their hands calloused from endless assembly lines, while the elderly scavenged for coal scraps to fuel sputtering stoves. Evenings brought a tense hush as families gathered around radios tuned to forbidden BBC broadcasts, the static crackling like secrets being shared in the dark. The black market thrived in shadowed alleys, where whispers exchanged cigarettes for butter or watches for whispers of news from the outside world. The scent of ersatz tobacco mingled with the pervasive odor of unwashed bodies and damp cellars, where neighbors huddled during alerts, their faces illuminated by flickering candlelight. Life persisted in these routines, a delicate balance of endurance and denial, as if by maintaining the facade of normalcy, the encroaching shadows could be held at bay. Subtle fishes began to appear, invisible at first, like hairline cracks in a dam holding back a torrent. In the autumn of 1944, whispers of Soviet advances filtered through the propaganda veil, carried on the lips of refugees streaming into the city from the east, their eyes hollow with tales of atrocities that chilled the bone. Air raids intensified, the whine of sirens becoming as familiar as a heartbeat, sending Berliners scrambling into dank shelters where the air grew thick with the smell of fierce sweat and mildew. Bomb craters pockmarked the streets like open wounds, and the once majestic Reichstag loomed as a scarred relic amid the debris. Food rations dwindled to starvation levels, with daily calories barely sustaining life, leading to swollen bellies and listless gazes among the young and old. Desertions from the Wehrmacht increased, soldiers vanishing into the urban underbelly, hunted by Gestapo patrols whose boots echoed ominously on cobblestones. Graffiti scrawled on walls mocked the regime. Enjoy the war. The peace will be worse. A sardonic acknowledgement of the inevitable. Yet these signs were dismissed by many as temporary setbacks, the regime's iron grip suppressing dissent with swift executions in Plötzensee prison, where the guillotine's blade fell with mechanical finality. The collapse did not announce itself with fanfare. It crept in quietly, through empty larders and silenced radios. As 1945 dawned, tension coiled tighter in Berlin's veins, the city pulsating with a feverish unrest that permeated every corner. Allied bombers roared overhead in relentless waves, their payloads transforming neighborhoods into infernos of flame and dust, the ground shuddering with each impact, as if the earth were convulsing. The acrid stench of burning timber and cordite hung perpetually in the air, stinging eyes and throats, while searchlights pierced the night sky like accusatory fingers. Evacuation trains departed sporadically, crammed with wide-eyed children clutching dolls and suitcases, their mothers waving farewell through tears, but many remained, bound by duty or denial. Thibault's Sturm, a ragtag militia of boys and old men, armed with outdated rifles, drilled in parks turned training grounds. Their awkward march is a poignant display of desperation. Rumors swirled like eddies of smoke. Hitler's returned to the city in January, bunkering in the Chancellery. His presence a spectral reassurance amid growing chaos. Black market dealings turned frantic, prices soaring as supplies vanished, leading to hushed arguments and desperate barters under the cover of dusk. Social bonds frayed, neighbors eyeing one another with suspicion, fearing informers in every shadow. The air crackled with anticipation, each siren wail a reminder that the noose was tightening, though few could predict the ferocity of what lay ahead. Pivotal choices sealed Berlin's fate, forged in the dim confines of the Vorbunker, where Hitler's trembling hand directed the remnants of his empire. Refusing Heinrich's pleas to retreat from the Oder, he insisted on holding every inch, dooming the Ninth Army to encirclement and annihilation. Orders to scorch the earth-destroying bridges, power stations, and food stores were issued with fanatical zeal, though some workers sabotaged these directives, preserving vital infrastructure amid the madness. Goebbels, as Reich, Commissioner for Defense, rallied the populace with fiery broadcasts, his voice crackling over loudspeakers urging total war, while conscripting even teenagers into the fray. The decision to flood subway tunnels to halt Soviet advances drowned countless civilians in surging waters, their screams echoing through the underground labyrinth. Hitler's denial of reality peaked on April 22nd, raging against perceived betrayals in a sweat-drenched tirade, declaring the war lost yet vowing to remain. These missteps, born of delusion and hubris, accelerated the unraveling, turning strategic retreats into suicidal stands. By the time the gravity of these eras dawned, the Red Army's tanks were already grinding toward the outskirts, their tracks churning the mud into a quagmire of inevitability. The system's fracture commenced not with a cataclysmic bang, but with the ominous thunder of Soviet artillery on April 20th, shells arcing through the sky to explode in the city center, shattering windows and lives in equal measure. The ground quaked under the barrage, dust cascading from ceilings as families cowered in cellars, the air thick with the metallic tang of fear and gunpowder. Encirclement tightened by April 25th, severing supply lines and trapping the populace in a vice of starvation and siege. Street fighting erupted in suburbs like Pankow and Weissensee, where the crack of rifles and whine of ricochets replaced the hum of daily life. Buildings crumpling into barricades of brick and twisted metal. Volkssturm units ill-equipped and terrified faced waves of battle-hardened Soviet troops, their youthful faces paling in the flash of muzzle fire. The S-Bahn ring became a front line, trains abandoned mid-track, as soldiers leapfrogged from ruin to ruin. Hitler's birthday passed in muted dread, the Vorbunker, a cocoon of paranoia where maps were pored over by candlelight. The collapse began quietly in those initial volleys, a prelude to the symphony of destruction that would engulf the capital, leaving no corner untouched by the encroaching tide. Human suffering cascaded through Berlin's streets as the siege intensified, a torrent of agony that washed over civilians like a relentless flood. Cellars became tombs, where the wounded lay moaning amid the stench of unwashed bodies and gangrene, candle flames guttering in the fetid air. Mothers clutched infants to their breasts, whispering lullabies over the din of explosions, while children, wide-eyed with terror, drew pictures in the dust. Rapes by advancing soldiers shattered families, the screams piercing the night like shards of glass, leaving survivors hollowed by trauma. Looting erupted sporadically, desperate hands rifling through abandoned homes for scraps of food or valuables. Though the regime's enforcers hanged looters from lampposts as grim warnings, water mains burst, flooding streets with murky torrents that carried debris and despair. The elderly perished in the cold, their frail forms collapsing unnoticed amid the chaos, while the young were pressed into combat, their small hands gripping Panzerfausts. With trembling resolve, social fabric tore asunder, trust evaporating in the haze of survival, neighbors turning on one another for a crust of bread. The air grew heavy with the odor of decay. Bodies left unburied in craters, a haunting testament to the breakdown that no propaganda could conceal. The long shadow of Berlin's fall reshaped the contours of history, cleaving Germany into divided realms and igniting the embers of the Cold War. The city's rubble-strewn landscape became a canvas for reconstruction, with Arubal women toiling under the sun to clear debris, brick by brick, their hammers ringing like a dirge for the old order. The Potsdam Conference in July 1945 read room maps, assigning zones to Allied powers, planting seeds of division that would sprout the Berlin Wall in 1961. Denazification trials exposed the regime's horrors, with Nuremberg's gavel echoing judgments that sought to excise the poison from society's veins. Europe's power balance shifted, the Soviet sphere expanding westward, while the West forged alliances against the Iron Curtain. Cultural scars lingered, literature and film capturing the zeitgeist of defeat works, like the tin drum evoking the absurdity and pain. Economically, the Marshall Plan infused life into the western sectors, fostering the Wirtschaftswunder, a miracle of revival amid the ashes. Yet the human cost echoed through generations, displaced persons wandering like ghosts, families sundered by borders. The collapse not only ended a tyranny but birthed a new era of tension, where the ruins of Berlin stood as eternal sentinels to the perils of unchecked ambition. In the quiet aftermath, as smoke dissipated over the shattered spires of Berlin, a profound silence settled, broken only by the tentative footsteps of survivors emerging from the wreckage. The once mighty Reich chancellery lay in ruins, its marble halls reduced to dust, a fitting epitaph for delusions of grandeur. Reflections on this rupture revealed the fragility of civilizations, how empires built on sand can dissolve in the storm of their own making. The wind now whispers through empty avenues, carrying echoes of sirens long silenced, a reminder that history's ruptures forge paths unforeseen. Berlin's story endures as a haunting mosaic of resilience and regret, where the scars of collapse etch lessons into the collective memory, urging vigilance against the quiet beginnings of downfall.